All right.
Thanks.
Oh, hey, you guys moved the camera around. Well, I'll kick us off because you can see my face. Wow, how'd you do that?
I have the
Now,
power.
now we can see people in the room. Welcome. It's Thursday, February 10th. This is the first meeting of Climate Solutions Caucus that's a hybrid. We're making technological leaps and bounds. So we have many of our particular House colleagues in person, and then a handful of us online. So Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you since you're in person, and then we have an exciting agenda. We're going to hop right to it.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. Please eat more pizza because I think they got enough pizza for the entire Climate Solutions Caucus and it doesn't look like we're all here yet. So what we wanted to do today was to check in on two of our biggest priorities for the year. And we wanted to get an update, not particular to the detailed policy, but particular to the strategy and the timing from here on out. So we have the House Energy and Technology Committee. Thank you, Rep. Briglin, for being here. Working on the clean heat standard, and what the Climate Caucus wants to know from you, Rep. Briglin, and from Senator Bray is when do you expect this bill to come out of your committee, and what can we do to help ensure a strong vote on the floor of the House for the clean energy or clean heat standard, and a strong vote on the floor of the Senate for a weatherization for all? So let's go to Briglin first, and then we'll do a few minutes of Q&A. Remember, we're focused on how do we move these big ideas forward, not on the nitty-gritty details, which I think you'll hear are still sort of in play within the committee context. But how can we help? So thank you, Rep. Briglin, for being here.
Yeah, no, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Good. I tried to get Chris Bray's room, but it was occupied. There was a food fight going on in there. I'm sure it'll be fine by the time you get into the building, Chris. But so I'm in institutions right now.
As long as they leave me something to eat.
Okay. So just to kind of give folks an update on where things stand with this bill right now. The first draft of the bill came out of my committee last Tuesday. And we've taken a ton of testimony, actually even before that first draft came out, and in the last week as well, from stakeholders all over Vermont, as well as actually some folks around New England as well. I think there's interest in this bill regionally, and how this might set the stage for not only work in Vermont, but I think other states around New England are very interested in how to address thermal efficiency and reducing fossil fuel use in the thermal sector. I put a second draft of this bill on the table for my committee to take a look at this morning. And of this, 18 or 19 page bill, we got through 3 pages of it in about 2 hours, to give you a sense of kind of the interest in my committee of digging into the nitty gritty details. So there's a lot of work to do here. This is not a straightforward process. The energy sector in Vermont that has been regulated for decades, if not centuries, that's a pretty straightforward process. As we pull thermal heating fuels into, let's call it, a more regulated space, that is, there's a lot of work to do there, just to figure out how we work with stakeholders, including people who sell fuel in the state. So that is, something that we're working on. And I won't go into policy here as much, but just to be clear, I don't think we're recreating the wheel here in terms of the policy we're talking about. West Coast states have clean fuel standards in place. They've been in place for years. And those standards work more in the transportation space, but they're directly analogous to what we're doing here. And there are states around New England that have, somewhat similar policies in place, particularly the state of Massachusetts. And there are other states that are trying to figure out how to move forward. And essentially what they're doing is they're putting mandates on how much biofuel needs to be blended into their heating fuels. Essentially, that's how they're going at it. And that's how they're trying to, green up what they're selling. I think we're trying to take more of a performance standard base that gives people options, that holds, the fuel economy, if you will, responsible for reducing emissions over time. And I think this, this looks to a predictable, sustainable, choice-laden path to reducing emissions over the next decade and getting to our GWSA requirements in 2030. I think one of the most attractive things about what we're trying to do here is, again, it's really performance-based. We are looking for people to move to the least expensive, highest emission reducing technologies and pathways that they can use. And I, to some extent, segueing to the work that Chris's committee is doing, the work we do in weatherization is going to be tremendously important to the success of a clean heat standard. And it's going to be tremendously important in a couple of ways. One, that we're going to dedicate a lot of federal dollars, and that's going to support the early work of a clean heat standard. And a lot of those dollars are focused on the communities that we most intensively want to support early in this process, which is low and middle income Vermonters. So that's going to be tied together pretty closely. Yeah, I'm not going to put a date on the calendar when we're going to get a bill out of committee, because that's like putting a stake through your heart in this building. But I will just tell you that my committee, and I see a couple of them in the room there. I think I see Ian Tochka chowing on some pizza there. But my committee is pretty deeply engaged in how this bill is going to work. And it's we don't do easy things in my committee. We take on the big things, and this is a biggie. This is huge. This is the hardest part of our kind of emissions portfolio. This is the hardest nut to crack, I think, by far. And this is the most important policy directed at that. And I'm hopeful that, in the next week or so, we're going to, be at a point where we can say we're going to get this to the floor. That's my hope.
Right. Questions for...
Oh, and actually, let me put one footnote on that. And I think Climate Caucus folks will be interested in this. This is not the only big bill that we're working on in my committee. We have a bill that is much more directed at the appropriations process, but is focused on directing ARPA dollars to municipalities and the energy efficiency and reducing fossil fuel usage by municipalities and supporting municipal assets, primarily buildings. But that is actually a big lift that my committee has undertaken, and I'm hopeful that is something we're going to get out potentially tomorrow, and it would go to the Appropriations Committee. But that's another thing that should be on your radar screen as important climate work that we're doing.
That's outstanding. Thank you.
I'll just jump in quickly. Thank you, Chair Briglin. The municipal SEMP bill, I think, is how we think of it, and it's certainly very much on our radar. And Sarah and I have described it as the public, figuring out how to be good citizens in our public spaces and benefit from savings opportunities for efficiencies. Let's go to questions. I think we have just maybe 5 minutes. If folks have questions for the chair on the clean heat standard, let's stick with that topic for now.
No, I'm not seeing any hands in the room here.
I thought I heard folks talking about greenwashing as I was coming in, but
yes.
I don't know if that's a problem I can solve, but if there's a question that was being kicked around.
Sure, I'll pose it to you this way. We have heard and that this is because it's market-based, because any number of, because you have Vermont Gas as an example, as a supportive entity, that probably we should be suspicious and that really the legislature is falling for something and this is greenwashing. Help us. What's the answer?
Yeah. So I think Well, I'll say a couple things to that. This is a huge issue, and we need everybody at the table to solve this problem. 95+% of Vermonters use fossil fuel in some form or fashion to heat their homes. And that's the infrastructure that people have in their homes. It's a furnace that burns oil, it burns propane, it burns natural gas, fill in the blank. And as we work to kind of transition people to either adding another fuel source, hopefully clean electricity, or moving altogether away from fossil fuel, maybe it's an advanced wood heating system, we are going to need to work with our fuel suppliers, whether it be Vermont Gas or somebody who drives a truck up to your house and puts a hose in the tank, to deliver fuel. We are going to need to work with those folks over the next decade as providers of weatherization, because I'll just, my local fuel supplier, he installs heat pumps. He does weatherization services for folks. These are trusted partners for a lot of Vermonters on their heating needs. And I don't think a lot of fuel dealers are terribly excited about a clean heat standard, but there are also opportunities for folks as they transition their business model. The fossil fuel industry is going to undergo massive transition in the next 10 or 15 years. And we need to work with those folks, again, on a predictable, sustainable step down in the use of these fuels. And so I frankly welcome them at the table to, help us, figure out how to do that in the least disruptive way possible.
Tim, could I just follow up? And is it fair to say to critics that, there's a slogan of kind of keep it in the ground, and I think that's a helpful image. We can't just keep mining fossil fuels and burning them and expect to move in the right direction. And then there would be folks that say, well, we should therefore shut those businesses down, the fossil fuels business, and maybe I would join them at the ExxonMobil headquarters. But here we're talking about the people that own the trucks that bring you your heating oil, for instance. And is it fair to describe what we're trying to do as an incentivized transition for those businesses to stay open, but be delivering less fossil fuel and be a partner in more sustainable heating sources? Is that oversimplified?
No, it's not. I think it's a good description. And it's so, maybe some folks who are on this call or in this room can help me with the verbiage here, because I really struggle when I, kind of say, well, the process of working with some of our fossil fuel providers in the state is a transition. It is a bridge to, a place, where we're burning a lot less of that. And I always hesitate to use the bridge analogy because, that's something we heard about 10 or 15 years ago about bridge fuels. And, that bridge kind of stopped halfway over the river and didn't get us there. So I hesitate to use that. But what we need to be prepared for helping Vermonters do is use less carbon intensive fuels. And as their, kind of home infrastructure is due for replacement, whether it's a water heater, whether it's a furnace, over the next 10 or 15 years, that we are there to help them move into a cleaner option. Again, with 95% of Vermont homes currently heated with fossil fuels, that's not something that you turn on a dime. That's something that we have to create a predictable, sustainable pathway to step down, like we've done, with the renewable energy standard that we have, basically requiring each year Vermont utilities to increase the amount of renewable energy they have in their mix. This looks at a similar pathway of predictable step down every year in the amount of emissions that come out of our thermal sector.
Thank you. I think we have one question in the room, and I see your hand, Senator Bray.
Rep. Bartholomew has a question.
Well, I'm just wondering how practical it really is to expect companies that have a business model to transition, and are they even the best companies in terms of being suited to do that work? And what comes to mind is My sister works in banking, deals with lots of large loans with oil companies, and I've asked her, why aren't these companies transitioning? And her response is, because they do oil. That's all they know how to do. And if they can't do oil, they go bankrupt. So are these companies really, are they suited to make the transition? Are they willing to make the transition? Or are they the best companies to be making the transition?
I think without question, there are going to be folks in the fuel sector in Vermont that are not going to make the transition, that they are only going to be in the business of selling fuel oil or selling propane. And that's a decision that they have to make. I think that that is a pretty dangerous place to be if you own a business and you're relying on selling increasing amounts of fossil fuel over the next 15 years, particularly if we have our way in putting a clean heat standard in place. But there are other Vermont businesses and fuel dealers who have expanded their business model. They've already done it, and they're going to continue to do that. And, that's why I also say, I actually know my fuel provider quite well. He's the person that installed a heat pump water heater in my house 18 months ago. And that's a business he's been in for 5 years. And he sees the writing on the wall that he's got to be in different technologies and different types of fuels that he's delivering if he wants to be in business in 10 years. And I will also say, kind of in a space where we are desperate for workers in our state who do weatherization work, we need to be looking toward our kind of our heat partners, if you will, who Vermonters look to in a trusted way to come into their house and advise them on these types of things, to be folks who are working with us in the weatherization space. And again, there are examples of Vermont heating companies who do a whole suite of these types of things. So, again, I'm not looking to turn away any partner that's going to help us make this transition. And, if I'm in the business of selling fuel, I'm looking to expand my business into other types of ways to help my customers at this point.
Sounds like survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. We want them to see the writing on the wall, and we're writing on the wall, right?
We are writing.
Senator Bray, quick question for you, then Senator Perchik, then we'll shift, I think.
I was just going to share the observation that, for really I've said to Matt Cota for 5+ years, we are looking for a genuine opportunity for your members. And then, when I first said that to him, he thought I was joking because they seemed to think that we were always going to be coming up with something adversarial. But they are a large workforce. They're trained, they're technicians, they have licenses that people need to have in order to do this sort of work. And it would be, and they are neighbors. Many of them are small local businesses, not all, but many. So with a sort of a open-minded, open-hearted thing, it's like, can we help you evolve? And no one ever bought oil or propane because they liked oil or propane. They liked warmth and comfort. And I think they are seeing that, and the more progressive ones are moving. My local heating oil supplier no longer sells heating oil. They do all service work, and that includes cold climate heat pumps and the rest. So I think they're going to be crucial partners, and I'm glad they're at the table. Although I think it's like trust but verify time.
Senator Perchlik.
I have a few questions. I'll let you choose which one you want to answer, Representative. One's kind of a macro question, is like what road bumps do you kind of see ahead of getting this bill passed, but both through your body and in the Senate? Kind of just what kind of heads up things you think we should know from members of the Climate Council? And then, but the other question is more in a micro question, details about biodiesel, and have you gotten down to that discussion in your committee about how that would or wouldn't participate as part of this?
I think at a high level, the challenges of passing this bill are, I think the high level concept of the policy here is not complex, but we all know in whatever committee we serve on, once you get down into the weeds, we're trying to find a fine balance between how much how prescriptive we are being to the PUC and the regulatory bodies out there who are ultimately going to implement this. And my committee is very eager to dig into the details, and I think that's healthy. But at the same time, some of this work has to be done ultimately by the professionals who are, ultimately going to design and implement. And I think that's one of the challenges in working in my committee on this. And ultimately, the questions that will come out on the floor and when it gets to the Senate. So, finding that balance, I think, is really important. And it's really important that we give, appropriate direction as, folks interested in climate action to make sure that that work ultimately gets done and that we are laying a very clear popcorn trail as to what we want to be accomplished. So finding that fine line, I think, tactically is one of the challenges that we will overcome. And your second question, about biodiesel. So, and there's a lot of controversy around this. That what kind of door are we opening here in allowing less carbon intensive fuels? And this has been struggled with out on the West Coast, I think, as well, in terms of what role those fuels play as a transition mechanism. And the clean heat standard as it stands now is at a high level looking at emission reduction. That is the goal. That is what we're trying to get to. It does not allow, as the bill is currently written, one to use the clean heat standard model to transition from one fossil fuel to another fossil fuel. So you can't say, oh, now I burn number 2 fuel oil, and that's very carbon intensive. Natural gas is, less carbon intensive. So, that's a pathway. That is not allowed in this bill. But what is allowed is for fuel dealers to mix, an increasing amount of biodiesel in their fuel that they sell to customers, and that to count toward emissions reduction. It's really important that you do accurate, transparent life cycle accounting as to how that works, so that we're very clear that biodiesel is not without its costs, but it is less carbon intensive. And if you look at the accounting that is done in a very minute way, all the way back to literally the root of the plant and the amount of fertilizer and water you have to use to grow that plant, those types of things are included in the analysis when we're looking at how carbon intensive is that. Again, I'll call it a transition fuel. But I think it's also important and this bill does do this, is to be somewhat technology agnostic. Again, what we're trying to get to is emission reductions. And what we've seen on the West Coast, and they've been doing this for years, is that in the early years, more of that emission reduction occurs in biofuel. But as you get into as you get years into these programs on the West Coast, you see more people adopting electric vehicles, for example. And you see the importance of those fuels going down, and the importance and prioritization of different technologies, in this case, electric vehicles, go up. And that's what I would anticipate happening here. Again, with 95+% of Vermonters using fossil fuels to heat with, what's the dial that we can turn immediately to reduce the carbon intensity? And then over time, actually replace those fossil burning technologies with, what we want to get people to, which is electric. So that was a long-winded answer. Sorry about that.
Well, it's a good answer. Chair Berglund, thank you for your hard work and the thoughtfulness you bring to this work. We will shift now, I think, to Senator Bray, who's your counterpart in the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee, to pick up a companion piece to our building efficiency work, something the legislature's worked on for over a decade now, weatherization of our buildings. But we've been doing it at far too slow a pace. to make the dent we need. And we're glad to pair these topics today because they do fit. You wouldn't want to shift people in a drafty home from an oil furnace to better to cleaner fuels, but still have a drafty home. We need to sort of work on the efficiency as well as the transition fuel. So glad to turn it over to Senator Chris Bray, and hope you can tell us about the plan to move weatherization at scale and rapidly increase our work in this sphere.
Thanks, Senator Pearson. Good to see you all. And Chair Briglin, you know, these two bills, really, these two concepts go hand in hand. It's, you know, you can see it back in the RES to begin with. We say we don't want to install heat. We didn't want to just incentivize the installation of heat pumps in unweatherized homes because heating the great outdoors more cleanly and efficiently wasn't our goal. It was to reduce the heat load and then clean up the source of that heat. And so the hand in glove thing, it's not a cliche. It really makes a lot of sense. The other thing too is that at least current technology on heat pumps has trouble keeping up at the lowest temperatures. So the more weatherized your home is, the more of the heating season that your cold climate heat pump system can manage to deliver all the heat you need. So people will recall that we have been sort of by hook or by crook through different pilots over the last 3 years, bringing a little more money into doing weatherization and to get into the using energy, electrical energy efficiency charge dollars to sort of crack open the door and do some pilots on thermal and transportation spaces. I think it was great that we did, because when we've had the great good fortune of having unprecedented level of federal dollars arriving in the state, we already had pilots that had been looking at how to pick up the pace, how to do more. And as Senator Pearson said, we know how to do weatherization. We know it's cost effective, but we haven't funded it at a level to keep pace with our needs, especially Paris and GWSA. So the bill S284, it's if you look at it, you might, I will say that the bill doesn't reflect what we're going to deliver in the end, in that in order to cover all the territory that we might ever need to cover, it proposes a working group. And that is so that we're laying out, sort of pre-laying the germaneness groundness for all future editions of this bill. At any rate, the first thing we do is we say we had an old goal in 10 VSA 581 of weatherizing 30,000 homes. And now we say we would like to actually add 90,000 to that goal and move to 120,000 by 2031. And then, so then the big question is, last year we had a bump in money from the federal dollars came in. We got up to $20 million. So we added more resources across the board for incentives through programs like all the energy efficiency utilities. So BED, VGS, and Efficiency Vermont had more money to spend on incentives that help us do that kind of energy retrofit work. We know we need to continue to do that kind of work, and we need to expand on two fronts. So there's three goals for the bill. One is this higher level of funding so that we can double and ultimately double again the rate at which we're weatherizing homes. So going from down around 2,000 to 4,000 to 8,000 a year. The out years, some people have much higher numbers. Who knows where we'll get to? But I would say if we double and double again, it puts us on a dramatically different pathway to meeting our target goals of 90,000 more homes. But in order to get there, so we need sustainable funding, because there are colleagues out there who have said we saw a surge of one-time money, the ARA money, American Rescue and Reconstruction Act dollars, 07, 08. And there was a blip, they hired on, they did more weatherization, and then there were layoffs that followed. So there are a lot of there are people who are interested but wary. So that's why this year's bill concentrates on lining up 4 years, additional 4 years of funding at $20,000 a year. And right now the governor's recommend supports that. There is the bit of a challenge that we can't encumber future legislatures to continue to make these investments, but the fact that we're budgeting for them and that we have broad support from the Appropriations Committee to do this work, I think it's really can't be underestimated how different it is. And already we're starting to see the market respond. And I think that's where we don't know what the positive effects will be, but they will be there. So we've relied mostly on government programs, the OEO programs, and the state's low-income weatherization program. They are helping, they are sort of if it was like the base load, this is like these are the basic services around the state that are delivering weatherization already. What is a little hard for us to tell is when private contractors see money flowing into the marketplace to support this kind of work, how many more private crews will come on and help us do that doubling and doubling again. So long-term money that's stable and at a level that supports this much higher level of weatherization. Then in order to deploy it, so we started last year on workforce. And when we say workforce, we mean two different kinds of workforce. We're talking about there's the kitchen table counseling, financial counseling that includes energy counseling. So Capstone, for instance, and NeighborWorks. We want people to be able to see the financial advantages, making the changes, and we're trying to do that through trusted, neutral third parties. They're not there to sell you anything. They're there to help you figure out how to manage your finances, including your energy costs. So that workforce is expanded last year and we'll continue to grow it for better outreach. The second thing is we need people who are the technicians who are going to go do the installation work. And so we're working now with, happily, the governor's talking about CTEs, the Career Technical Education Centers, and recognizing the value of the trades and putting money in there. So we're looking at partnering with those folks to develop the technical workforce in order to develop. Those are the three main legs on this stool, workforce to counsel, workforce to deliver the service, and funding at the level that we need for the long haul. We would also like to be a little more ambitious. So we're looking at the certification of weatherization contractors that will help us ensure that we're getting high quality service delivered, and that when we are investing state dollars, that we have some level of assurance and quality control over what we're delivering. That already happens through agencies like the Low Income Weatherization Program, but it's not necessarily a practice across the private sector. Also looking into creating a registry of certified weatherization contractors. So again, for customers who are looking, they'll know that they're dealing with someone who's going to be delivering good services. And then we're also looking ahead to affordable ways of financing. That it goes beyond this $20 million a year that we're talking about. There are many people in the 80 to 120% AMI range, area median income range. They may be very well interested in doing this work, but it's just a little unaffordable. We know it's cost effective over time. The question is, can you come up with that money up front? Are you creditworthy? Are you even feeling like you're willing to take on any more debt? So there's some very interesting work. It's being led by Maura Collins and her team at VHFA, and that is an on-bill tariff. So in essence, the loan, the money that goes out to do the work at a house will be booked as a loan to that meter. And whoever is paying that bill of that meter is paying off that loan over time. But the individual beyond the meter inside the house, they didn't take a loan out. It's not their personal loan. So we eliminate that loan reluctance and the creditworthiness questions that are a problem for moving money out into the field. It's an innovative model that's been done on smaller levels in some other places. We've been looking at it for a year, and I think, I'm not counting any chickens till they hatch, but right now it's promising as a way of getting many more people to become capable of signing up for the work we'd like to do. And I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Sarah, turn to you for a question. We just have a couple minutes left. You might be muted.
Muted, yeah. Oh, hi, can you hear us now?
Yep.
I don't know how the room got muted, but that's good. So you didn't hear us munching on our pizza. So Senator Bray, the sort of the question that seems to be seeping around the room here is, when do you expect this bill will move to the Senate floor? Because of course, we are eager to know that that the bill is coming over to the House for its consideration, and know that you also have other things that your committee is working on.
Sure. Thanks for that reminder. I didn't get to that. I forgot to talk about that. So right now we are doing the environmental justice bill and an Act 250 bill that addresses primarily housing and forestry. And we've been taking some preliminary testimony on this. So we're getting this iron in the fire. We should be moving our Act 250 and environmental justice bills out in the next roughly 10 to 15 days. And that will clear the deck to be full speed ahead on weatherization. We're definitely will be making crossover, absolutely no doubt about that. It is, in a certain way, it's our highest priority energy bill. But, we wear two hats on this side, so we ended up with more environmentally oriented, the EJ bill and Act 250. So,
yeah, I see that must bump you right up against crossover, given that I think crossover is maybe 18 legislative days from now.
Yeah. Well, we have this thing in the Senate. It's just a very big, broad brush, Remember when I was in the House, we always talked about the Senate broad brushing. No, I'm teasing us. We've been working on this steadily for years now. So we're at the point of we're seeing witnesses that we've been literally talking to for years as well, and getting reports back, fine tuning, and I think we will be in good shape and we will move a timely bill.
So I think we're going to have to call it there, because I've got to get to the Senate floor, and I'm sure House folks have to get to committee meetings. This has been a great overview of our priorities around thermal, our thermal work, a big part of our emissions, source of emissions in Vermont. Sarah, any last words before we?
Yes, look at this. We've got, there we go.
I have one thing to let you all know. I was at the press conference regarding the builder registration bill, and during the press conference found out that the governor vetoed the bill
already.
So I hope we can get an override.
He did already.
That's disappointing news.
Technicians.
So thank you, chairs, for being with us, and we will get ourselves reoriented to focus on contractor registry.
All right.
Breaking news here, Climate Caucus. Thank you, everybody.
Kurt McCormick, great to see you again.
Nice to see you, Chris.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.